Hello, Frizzle fans. I am a big Brandon Sanderson fan. I think his books are fantastically plotted and wonderfully characterized. And do I need to tell you about the world building? Probably not. Because he does that, I think, better than pretty much anyone else. And of all of his books, Mistborn Era 2 is like my favorite. I love it. And so I was really excited going into The Lost Metal, book 4 of Mistborn Era 2. I gave the first 3 books 5 stars. I've read them and reread them so many times. I'll link my review for 𝐂𝐿𝐒 in the footnotes. I got to the end of The Lost Metal and I was really disappointed. And in that moment, I realized that I couldn't give it anything more than 3 stars because it didn't have what I was looking for. It didn't have what I wanted. It didn't enchant and delight me like the first 3 books did. And so this is that video. Why me, someone who loves Brandon Sanderson books, and especially Mistborn Era 2, was really let down by The Lost Metal and how that all happened. Let's start here. There was a release event for The Lost Metal that was live streamed on Brandon Sanderson's YouTube channel, and in that event, he gave a speech. It's a really well done speech. He is a fantastic public speaker. I'll link it in the footnotes, and highly recommend it if you're interested in his process and thoughts surrounding Mistborn and the 𝐂𝐿𝐒. But like in that video, he said something, and I think it's like the root of all of my problems with this book is the way that he approached it, which isn't Okay. In this speech, he tells some anecdotes and stories about writing assignments. That sometimes, like in school, you're given a prompt to write a short story in certain parameters, and he's always kind of struggled with following the assignments. And then he's comparing that to larger trends in the publishing industry being like assignments. Like when he was first starting out books, what was trending and selling in the fantasy publishing space was like more contained adventure books. Fans were not going in for lots of connected universes, keeping track of all of the lore and things. The heavy continuity stories were not the assignment. But like in the last 2 decades, that's slowly been shifting for a few different factors. One being that the internet makes it easier to create fan cultures around continuity and lore, and also like the rise of popularity of things like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And yet, there persists this assignment in publishing that if Brandon Sanderson is making this large interconnected universe, then it should at least be understandable for people who don't want to go in for that whole interconnected universe. Like, you can enjoy any individual 𝐂𝐿𝐒 book without reading the entire 𝐂𝐿𝐒. And until this point, Brandon Sanderson has been fulfilling that assignment pretty well. But then, for The Lost Metal, as he put it, the gloves are off, and he is done trying to fulfill this assignment. And I totally get it. I totally agree that if these are the books that he wants to be writing, he should be writing these books. But also, when he says that The Lost Metal is the most like 𝐂𝐿𝐒 connections, world hoppers, lore heavy book, that's not an overstatement. It's fact. And this may be the book that he wants to write, but it's not the book that I wanted to read. And what I admired so much about Mistborn Era 2 is that it felt a little lighter than Mistborn Era 1, that it was more fun. And as Brandosando in his speech kind of also talked about this, how Mistborn Era 2, the 𝐂𝐿𝐒 kind of started out as like a project to take a break from heavier, longer projects, just like a fun little thing. And then in his heart, he's feeling like he's almost neglecting the Wax and Wayne books by not bringing them into the bigger 𝐂𝐿𝐒 better. And so he's rectifying that. And I hate it. Because that's one of the reasons that I like Wax and Wayne in the first place. It's okay. Now let's talk specifics. The Lost Metal heavily features the intergalactic gang of the Ghostbloods. And here's the thing, the Ghostbloods worked so well when they were introduced in the Stormlight Archive books. Because in the Stormlight Archive books, when the gang of the Ghostbloods is trying to recruit one of our protagonists, Shallan, she has a lot of feelings about it. This is the gang that can both find her all the answers she's searching for, and maybe engineered the death of several of her close friends and family members. And one of the things about the gang of the Ghostbloods is that they demand, like, secrecy from their members, and you can't tell anyone else about them. And for Shallan, who's already keeping so many dangerous secrets, and maybe doesn't want to add another, but also, she's very tempted. It makes perfect sense as a challenge to her character and an interesting way to push her forward in new directions. But then, in The Lost Metal, the Ghostbloods show up and talk to Marasi, our constable character, who's very upright and is not too into corruption. So when they try to recruit her to do shady business and tell her she can't tell her fellow constables, you already know she's gonna say no. It's not like it's a moral quandary for her. But it's even worse than that, because the Ghostbloods in this book are just like a vessel of exposition dumps, and it drove me insane. We get to meet a few different members of the Ghostbloods in The Lost Metal, but only like 2 of them become important to the plot. Moonlight and Twinsel, and both of them, like, what do they want out of life? Why are they willing to put their lives on the line to fight this battle? What made them want to join the Ghostbloods in the first place? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? You know what I can tell you in detail? Their powers, and what their powers do, and how cool they are, and I do not care about world building if it's divorced from the angst of character arcs. And these characters in this plot line was just all world building. Like, it drove me insane from the very beginning when the Ghostblood was like, yo, Marasi, if you join our secret organization, we can tell you all the secret answers you've been searching for. And Marasi is like what? And the Ghostblood is like, can't tell you until you join the organization. And Marasi is like, oh, but please tell me. And then the Ghostblood is like, oh, okay. And then jumps into like a chapter of exposition dump about the nature of the 𝐂𝐐𝐬𝐒 and the shards, and like, if I wanted to read long exposition dumps about the nature of the 𝐂𝐐𝐬𝐒, I would go onto the wiki, which is wonderfully maintained by the fandom and so good for things like this. But you know where I don't need exposition dumps? In the middle of an intense chase sequence. You know where I don't? That's my alarm, for 𝐂𝐒 has been negative for too long. We will now say something positive about The Lost Metal. After all, I did rate this book 3 stars, not 1 star. There were things about it that I liked. Here is one bit of 𝐂𝐿 connections that I really liked in this book, which was chowder. Oh my goodness, that was such a good scene. In the Stormlight Archive books, there's a street food called chowder, and a lot of the characters like it. And then in this book, they're selling chowder as street food in 𝐂𝐿𝐒, and I love the idea of recipes and cooks getting spread throughout the 𝐂𝐿𝐒. And it was just like such a little magical moment when they first started describing the food that they were eating. And I was thinking, this sounds a lot like chowder. And then they're like, oh, it's called chowder. Yes! Oh yes, that was fun. I like that little connection. Now, let's transition back into things that I didn't like about this book, but now we are going to be improving on it. So how would I rewrite the Ghostbloods plotline to make it better? I have an idea, and I think it's a good one, so let me know what you think. One of the reasons that I was excited to read The Lost Metal was because of the tease at the end of book 3, Bands of Mourning, where it was revealed that fan favorite Kelsier was alive, even though we thought that he had died tragically like 200 years ago. But he's still alive and moving and shaking and pulling strings, and I was excited to see him in this book. I was excited to see how he had changed and what was motivating him now. And he does appear in The Lost Metal for like a few pages, and he doesn't really do much. So like, I don't want to rewrite the entire book because I do respect what Brandon Sanderson is trying to do here, with introducing us more to the idea of inter-shard violence and planetary conquest and stuff, right? So we are going to keep that the Ghostbloods want to stop autonomy. But instead of having those characters that are helping our main team be Moonlight and Twinsel, it's going to be Kelsier. And there's more. So the big threat in The Lost Metal is that the bad guys have developed a huge bomb that will destroy the big city of Elendel, and lots of people would die and it would be really bad, right? But there is a larger threat of the incoming invasion of the god Autonomy. And the only thing that will make her stop her invasion is if she is impressed by the people of 𝐂𝐿𝐒. If they can show her that they are like competent and capable and autonomous. So let's imagine that Kelsier wants to stop this bomb from going off because he cares about that city. But Kelsier even more wants to stop the invasion from Autonomy. And if it's only Kelsier saving the day, does that prove that they are like autonomous and independent and ready to conquer themselves so they don't need to be conquered by her? Not really. Because he's like an intergalactic world hopper now. He's not really like a citizen of 𝐂𝐿𝐒 anymore. And in this way, we get to give Kelsier a inner conflict. Because we know his personality, we know that he likes to be in charge. But now, he has to not only get that bomb to be stopped, but he has to do it in a way that he's helping our main gang of Wax and Wayne and friends to do it spectacularly themselves. That he's only allowed to be in like an advisor role, because if he does too much, then Autonomy won't leave the planet alone in the end. And I think that interaction of the friction between Kelsier wanting to lead the team, but also knowing that like he isn't supposed to lead the team, and having him and Wax kind of square off as team leaders in that way, like, oh, that would have been fun, right? And then we would have gotten payoff for for that setup of teasing Kelsier an entire book ago that came out like 6 years ago. Okay. So instead of having these Ghostbloods with fun powers that I don't care about, we can just bring back a character that everyone cares about and also give him more depth and not... What did I like about the Ghostbloods characters? I liked the little interesting clue that they gave us towards the purpose of the Ghostbloods. The character of Moonlight states that the big goal of the Ghostbloods is to protect the planet Scadrial. But then, like, if the only goal of this organization was to protect a single planet, they wouldn't be so active on all the other planets, like Roshar. So there's got to be something more, a different layer of what the Ghostbloods organization was really standing for and working towards. And I am intrigued by that mystery, and honestly a little excited to see where the Ghostbloods go further in future books. Okay, new complaint topic now. The predictability of the plot twists. Now, on the list of things that Chloe likes and doesn't like in books, whether or not I can predict the plot twist isn't that important to me. But it is on the list, and something about the writings of Brandon Sanderson is that he usually does really good plot twists that are set up so well, and yet you still can't see them coming, and the Mistborn books are especially good about this. But like, in this book, I saw like all of the plot twists coming, which was kind of disappointing because I had such high expectations, and then it was like, oh, and it's time for me to spoil these plot twists now. In the end of this book, it is revealed that one, the special vial that Harmony gave to Wax makes people into a Mistborn, which, yeah, saw coming as soon as it was like, this is the special vial. And then two, that Wax had already become a Mistborn from that explosion in the lab, something that I also saw coming from the moment the explosion happened. Like the second explosion in Wax's face, and then afterwards when he was like, oh, like I keep seeing all these blue lines and I have a headache, and I'm like, oh, duh, he's a Mistborn now. All he has to do is like drink the other metals. And I kept waiting for that to happen, and now that I start thinking about this, it like doesn't make any sense in the end when like he needs to use the, what's it called? Delirium, the special powerful metal and he's running those other metals. And then what he does is he establishes himself to kind of drinks the metals, and then he's looking in his stomach and he's just running metal turns. I don't understand why Harmony did that moment. I understand that there was like 16 extra metals to burn. I mean, in the end, it's a trivial complaint that I don't like care that much about, but it was just that the mysteries were... I really liked the pacing of this book. Like always, Brandon Sanderson nails the pacing. It's always just fast enough, not too fast, and then everything like slowly ramps up until you get the Sanderlanche at the end that is just always so satisfying. This book is readable all the way through. Yes, there were moments where I was annoyed with this book, like a lot of moments actually, more than just moments, but there was never a time where I was considering not finishing this book. There was never a time when I didn't think that it was going to get better and give me the awesome conclusion that I was expecting. And it did. It delivered. I liked the ending. The ending was a really nice passing of the torch moment that we've gotten so many epic finales from Wax that finally Wayne gets one. And this book juggles its multiple point of views really well. In many books, when there's multiple point of views, you're going to have your favorite, you're going to have your least favorite, and it's always disappointing when you're switching from one to the other kind of thing. But in this book, I was always very satisfied with the switch of point of views because all the plot lines were equally interesting and fun. The thing is, a story about an invading dark god can really work, and can really work in the Mistborn universe. A plotline of like warring godlike forces worked spectacularly well in Mistborn Era 1, but then I never felt the threat of the invasion of autonomy, and here's why. So like I said, we have our little threat that's pretty big, honestly, our big little threat of the bomb destroying Elendel, and then we have our even larger threat of the invasion of autonomy. The motivation for the villains setting off this bomb is to stop autonomy from destroying the entire planet, reportedly. But the thing is, I never felt like our protagonists really wrestled with the idea that there was a bigger threat. I never felt that our characters were taking seriously the entire world is going to be conquered kind of threat past the bomb. And so because our characters weren't taking it seriously, that like I wasn't afraid or taking it seriously. Like, what's gonna happen? The god's gonna invade? Obviously not. And I would have loved a moment for our characters to stop and discuss, like, wait a minute, maybe if we stop this bomb from killing this city, the entire planet will be killed, and have to do that triage calculus and decide if they really want to go down this route of stopping the bomb. In the end, they also stopped the invasion of autonomy from coming through, but it's a close thing. But it was like, because our characters didn't care about this big threat, I couldn't care about this big threat. It didn't feel like a big threat, and it was just like pointless and... Okay, something I loved about this book. Wayne continues to be our comic relief, and I continue to find him funny. I think he adds a really nice tonal balance to these books with his fun wordplay and pranks. I especially liked the plotline twist of Wayne being ridiculously wealthy because he keeps accidentally making really good investments and just trying to get rid of his money and accidentally making even better investments. It was hilarious, and those scenes were a joy. So I think my complaints about this book can be put into two categories. And we've already talked a lot about category number one, which is too much of an emphasis on world building and 𝐂𝐐𝐬 connections and world hoppers. But then category number two, the lack of good character arcs and stakes. I already talked a little bit about that with like giving Kelsier something to do and stuff like that. But let's talk more about those character arcs, because this book, from the very beginning, was already failing in that department. Let's talk about our four main characters. We have Wax, Wayne, Steris, and Marasi. Wax, in the first three books, has gone through a wonderful character arc. Book one opens with his wife being murdered, and then he is dealing with that and also dealing with coming back into his duty as a political and wrestling with the idea of should he help the world in one way or the other way, and getting over his grief of his wife and finding new love, and he has gone through a journey. But by the end of book three, he's kind of done with that character arc, right? And The Lost Metal opens with Wax being like, my life is great and I am contented and everything is fine and I'm no longer grieving my wife and I am happy with my position and no longer conflicted about anything. And you can see the problem with making him an engaging character with a nice arc. And then let's take Marasi, who started out the series very timid and not sure of her own strengths or value, idolizing Wax and Wayne and being unsure of how she could contribute to the world. But then throughout the books, she gains more confidence, she gains more experience and more admiration from everyone. And then we open up book four, and Marasi is self-assured and competent and happy. She is grounded and has found her happy place in society where she can really contribute, and she's like the top of her field. So where is Marasi's character arc? And then we look at Steris, who started out the series like not believing that she could make friends, not believing that she could find love or really be respected and valued for her stupendous talents of organizing and planning for every contingency. But then we start out this book, and Steris has her group of friends. She has a very wonderful relationship with her husband, Wax. She's even bantering back and forth with Wayne, and she is self-assured and really pushing things in politics and making things happen well. Where does Steris get to go? Kind of nowhere. She's done also. Wayne does get a character arc in this book, which is about time because he hasn't really in the previous books. I think him overcoming the guilt of killing that man many years ago is a really good place for his character to go, and felt heartfelt and given all of the page time that it needed. But like 1 out of 4 protagonists having a character arc, this isn't enough, especially because one of the things that I love about Brandon Sanderson books is that moment at the end of the book when you get a triumphant ending for our characters because of their development. They are finally able to defeat the villain in a way that they couldn't before. And 3 of our protagonists get like a little semblance of a character arc. Like, for example, Steris is nervous about being in politics for a little bit, but then is completely prepared, of course. And we just don't get that firecracker character ending that I was hoping for. Even with Wayne's plotline. Yes, I liked the ending of him sacrificing himself and getting to be the hero. But also, I feel like it's a thing he could have done at the beginning of the book. Like, it's not connected to his new self-acceptance. And let's like imagine rewriting one of these plot lines. I really want to rewrite Marasi's, because then at least we could like make it work a little better with the awful Ghostbloods plotline. So let's imagine Marasi. Instead of starting off the book really like self-assured and loving her job, she starts off the book impatient about the lack of progress and really resenting the due process that she has to follow. And then when the Ghostbloods come in and give her an invitation to their secret society, she can actually like be tempted by that and be really seriously considering it, because this is a way to get that change that she really wanted. And then maybe she could start joining the Ghostbloods and then later have that reversal where she comes back to like the good side and reclaims her belief in truth and justice. And yes, this would be kind of contradicting the growth that she had in the first 3 books, but my favorite plotline in this book was Steris's. Maybe that's because it didn't have as much 𝐂𝐐𝐓𝐄𝐑𝐒 junk in it, but also it's because I just really love the character of Steris. Though I am not as overprepared or socially awkward, usually, as Steris, I do have lots of that in me, and it's just really fun to see a character like that in a book. I also just loved seeing her shine, because Steris is the one who overprepares for all the emergencies, and now that there's an actual emergency, she can just present everyone with her perfectly detailed plans. And just like Steris likes being appreciated, I'd like Steris being appreciated, and seeing her be able to save the day in her own way, yes. That was really fun. And I also really loved the scenes with Wax and Steris together. They're just such a cute and mature couple. I loved them doing science together. Just working like perfectly in sync as a team, get results and be safe while doing it, and discussing it with each other and doing research with each other, and just combining both of their like intellectual hobbies. And that's just so cute because it harkens back to them bonding over that kind of thing in the earlier books. So I need to get out some thoughts now about the general trend of Brandon Sanderson's writing. Because after reading this book, I was thinking about the last few Brandon Sanderson books I've read, the last few ones he's put out. I'm thinking about The Lost Metal and Starsight, book 2 in the Skyward series, and Rhythm of War, book 4 in the Stormlight Archive series. And for all of those books, my complaint boils down to the same thing. Too much world building that is not tied into character arcs. Too much lore, not enough character angst. And these 3 most recent books, I really didn't like them as much as Brandon Sanderson's older books, where he had a little less lore and a little bit more character. And I can't even blame, like, the 𝐂𝐿𝐒 building, because Starsight isn't a 𝐂𝐿𝐒 book, and yet it still managed to info dump me, like, 16 different species of aliens, and all of their cultures and histories. And I think it's just that, like, my taste and Brandon Sanderson's writing style are slowly diverging. Especially with Brandon Sanderson talking about how he wants to include more of this continuity and lore in his books in the future. And if you had asked me a year ago, I would have said Brandon Sanderson is like an auto-read author for me. He puts out a book, I am reading it as soon as possible. I love them. But then now, I'm starting to think that I just need to break up with Brandon Sanderson books. Like, not never read a Brandon Sanderson book again, but also not just like pick up everything he writes, because if he continues on this trajectory, I'm just gonna get even more and more sad if I'm still hyping up the books for myself. I'm still going to read his 4 books that are coming out next year with the secret projects because I already have them like Kickstarter pre-ordered, and I also hope that because they weren't written with like the fans in mind, maybe they won't have as big 𝐂𝐿𝐒 tie-in moments, you know? But I guess we'll just see how me and these novels get along moving forward. And I hope we get along better, but I strongly suspect that this is the beginning of the end of me being a Brandon Sanderson fangirl. And that's okay, because there's lots of people that love the lore and the world building and the 𝐂𝐿𝐒, and I am happy for you. I am so happy that there are people out there that can read this book and give it 5 stars and have a blast with it. But it's just not me. Thank you for watching. If you want to give me a emoji in the comments, give me a hat emoji for all of the hats that Wayne wears in this book. A big thank you especially to my patrons, and if you want to join us, there's a very fun perk of a monthly book club. Next month we're reading Middle Game by Seanan McGuire, and I'm very excited for that, and I hope that you can join us if you wish.